Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Peppis, filling in for Barbara Altman. Our guest today is Pius Cheung, Assistant Professor of Percussion in the School of Music and Dance. Cheung is an internationally renowned marimba artist and composer. His brilliantly played CD of Bach's Goldberg Variations elicited a feature story in the New York Times, which praised not only his technical feat of performing the intricacies of this keyboard work on the marimba, but also, quote, his deeply expressive interpretation, notable for its clear voicing, eloquent phrasing, and wide range of color and dynamics, unquote. Since his U.S. concerto debut with the Philadelphia Orchestra in 2003, Cheung has toured extensively as a concerto and recital soloist around the world. His winter and spring 2012 schedule includes performances in Denmark, Hong Kong, Beijing, and Washington, D.C. Cheung moved from his native Hong Kong to Vancouver, BC at the age of 12. He received his Bachelor of Music from the Curtis Institute, his artist diploma from the Boston Conservatory, and his doctorate from the University of Michigan. He joined the U of O music faculty in fall 2011. Pius, welcome to UO Today.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let me begin by the normal opening question. What led to your interest in the marimba and pursuing a career in music?
Well, to clarify, I'm a percussion faculty here, so I actually play everything else too, like snare drum, timpani. But yes, the marimba is, I'd say, what I focus on primarily as performance outside of school, as a performer outside of school. Now, like most people, I started off on piano at the age of 5, I believe. And that was just coincidence because my sister was the one that actually, my older sister was the one that actually started learning piano first. My parents bought a piano, she quit. So guess who got the piano? And then after that, I actually started learning drum set because I wanted to be a quote-unquote cool rock drummer, because who doesn't want to be a rocker? And then I got sent to the Academy of Performing Arts in Hong Kong, and that's where I was more or less forced to play all the percussion instruments, and marimba was my least favorite instrument at the time. But then as the years grew on, I started maturing a little bit, and then started leaning towards the marimba more and more. And something about the wooden sound just vibrated with me, and then it also, just because it's a keyboard-like instrument, it combined my interests in percussion and my backgrounds in piano into one, so that's my comfort zone right there. But and then I've also done a lot of orchestral playing, chamber music playing, and that's not exclusively marimba. That starts to mix in other instruments as well.
So could you tell me a little bit about the history of the marimba?
Yeah, the history. I believe, I mean, it's quote disputed sometimes, but imagine in some kind of native tribal surroundings in Africa, someone accidentally dug a hole in the ground and put a piece of wood on top of it and just started hitting it. And that's the original form of the marimba. So I'd say the marimba is an African instrument. The word itself actually means talking wood or singing wood or speaking wood or something like that. And it's used to literally sometimes communicate messages between people. And then there's that balafon version of the marimba, the African version, and then it eventually migrated up to like South America and then Central America. It's very popular in Mexico, and as a matter of fact, it's the national instrument of Guatemala. But those marimbas are very different from what we see in Western classical music in the States, in Europe, and Asia. And those marimbas, instead of metal resonators underneath, they have these gourds underneath, or they would poke a hole in the resonator made out of wood and stick a piece of some kind of membrane on it, so the sound actually vibrates a little bit. And then until it migrated up to America and then Europe, then that form of the instrument changed again. We don't have that membrane, and then the resonators are made out of metal. And
have you ever played one of the more
I have. I've been to Mexico quite a few times, and it's a little different. I wouldn't say it's completely different, but the sound is definitely more folk song-ish. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So when did people start playing classical music on the marimba?
Beginning of the 1900s, but when it really started getting into gear, I'd say 1940s. So it's relatively young.
And people play jazz on it and other kinds of music as well.
In jazz, I mean, there's stereotype jazz people use vibraphone, and then classical is marimba, but I don't really care.
Is there? I mean, can you tell us what the difference between a vibraphone?
Sure. The marimba is made out of wood, and between the marimba and the xylophone, without getting too technical about it, is the xylophone is smaller and has a much brighter sound, and the marimba is a lot mellower sounding. It all has to do with the overtone series, which I'm not sure how many people are interested in.
You don't need to get that technical.
And then vibraphone is made out of metal.
Is there a standard marimba repertoire in classical music?
There's some. It's still relatively limited because, as I said, it's really only starting to get into gear for the past not even 100 years. So it's very limited and mostly contemporary music. And of course, we do a lot of transcriptions, a lot of Bach, and that's one of my specialties, of course. And a lot of marimba players and percussionists actually compose themselves too, and I'm one of them.
You mentioned Bach, and you really got on the map because of this version of the Goldberg Variations that you did on the marimba.
Right.
No one had ever done it before, is that correct?
No.
Can you say what inspired you to do that?
That was crazy. I mean, it's just such a marvelous piece of music, and I remember at that time, I wanted to challenge myself. I felt like I needed something that somehow includes everything in the world, or quote unquote define life through music. And it was either the Goldberg Variations or a full-scale Mahler symphony orchestra involving like 100 people, which would sound horrible if arranged on marimba. And trust me, I tried. Does not sound good. So I tried the Goldberg Variations, and I remember actually scheduling a student recital. At the time, I was still at the Boston Conservatory. Scheduled the recital 2 weeks before I even looked at the piece, just because I knew if I didn't do that, I would never have the motivation or the courage to do it. Performance went well. Other performances have gone better, of course. And I didn't really think about, what it would do to my career until, I was out of school. I wanted to make a CD, and I'm not sure if you knew this or not, but that was actually just me and another friend of mine. We rolled the school's marimba into his basement, 2 mics, recorded it, and paid for the print myself. And I didn't know what that would be like the important stepping stone to my career.
Well, why don't we take a look at your performing the theme of the Goldberg Variations, the aria.
Sure.
Let's see if I can get it to go. Trying. Huh.
It's moving.
Is it?
Or I hope it is.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Lovely.
Right.
The Variations, it's long. It's a very long piece. Like, what's half an hour or something?
No, about an hour.
An hour.
Yeah.
So I noticed that you sit on a bench.
Yes, I do.
That's not typical.
That's not typical at all. Half of it has to do with my backgrounds as a pianist, but to be honest, I just got lazy. I was practicing because, in an hour piece, and I do slow practice, that's 2 hours of standing nonstop. My knees got tired. At the time I was again at the Boston Conservatory. The marimba practice room was right next to the organ practice room. So I looked at the organ bench and went, grabbed it, sat down, and done ever since.
That's now one of your signature characteristics, huh? He's the marimbist on the bench.
Yeah, for the better or worse, yes.
Are there any specific challenges, aside from the scope and length of the piece, that the Goldberg Variations presented for somebody playing it on marimba?
Yes, imagine on the harpsichord, you have 10 fingers.
It was
originally for the harpsichord. I mean, it's commonly played on the piano these days also, but both these instruments, you have 10 fingers. On the marimba, I can use 4, so I think you can go from there, imagine.
So did you adapt it for the marimba?
I did. I mean, I adapted it, and I purposely said adapt, not arrange, because an arrangement would mean I would have to change the piece. An adaptation meaning I changed as little as possible, and I did try to change as little as possible because Bach is so mathematically perfectly proportioned. I'm not the kind of guy that could change it. So what I did was I took a couple notes that are out of the range. I just took up an octave and cut out as little notes as possible. I believe not so much.
I know that Vivian Schweitzer thought it was wonderful in the New York Times. I know also that among Baroque music people, there's a debate about whether Bach can ever be played on modern instruments. Obviously, you're not one of the people that believes it can only be played on the old instruments. But have you found that you've persuaded people that this kind of adventurousness is worth doing?
Not the purists. The purists, they're pretty stuck to what they do. Although, actually, I have quite a few times. I remember a few Baroque specialists saying, "This actually sounds better than on piano." I didn't convince them to say this sounds better than it's on harpsichord, but that's one step closer.
I'm sure, as a purist, piano is really no better than the marimba in a certain way because it's not the harpsichord, right?
But the funny thing is, when I observe the percussion world, there are many percussionists out there that actually insist on Baroque performances on marimba. I look at them and that's ironic because you are playing a Baroque piece on a modern instrument. It will never be Baroque. So I just look at that and laugh. But
so what would you call it when you don't call it Baroque when you do it?
I mean, music is music.
Music is music.
Yeah.
Your latest CD is titled Symphonic Poem, and it's a disc that features your own compositions. How would you describe yourself as a composer? How would you characterize your compositions?
I still have the trouble calling myself a composer because the only really need for me to compose is because there's so much, the repertoire is so limited. And personally, I'm in love with what we commonly call the Romantic period compositions like Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Liszt, Brahms, especially as a pianist. That's the music I grew up loving, and that's why I got into music. Imagine how much of that language there is for the in the marimba repertoire. I'd say about 10 pieces, and they're all mine. So a better way I define myself, I'm more of a high-quality stealer of other composers. So I just take some language that I've learned and studied over the years of many legendary composers that I love and just try to do what I can with them and find how the marimba could fit in with that language. And of course there are some pieces that I compose as a composer, not as a marimba player, which is completely off the wall. but those pieces are rarely recognized by others.
You also play modern music as well.
Yes, I do. I mean, that's part of the job. I mean, as a musician, and I tell my students this often, is don't. I mean, of course, we all have an area that we'll be specifically interested in or particularly good at. But it's very important to be well-rounded in all instruments, all genres, because I want them to make a living as a musician when they get out there.
So, do you have any future plans for CDs of your own compositions or other pieces from the classical repertoire?
There are actually two projects that I'm juggling, and one is my first concerto CD with in collaboration with a publishing house in Denmark, and it will involve my own concerto that I composed and one or maybe two new compositions, or perhaps the Rhapsody in Blues that I arranged for orchestra and marimba. And the other pet project I have going on in my mind is a second Bach CD involving the other variation forms by Bach.
Very interesting. What made you decide to become a music professor?
I don't.
Right, you
right.
sort of hit the big time. New York Times says you're the greatest, and you decide to become a music prof. What?
Well, I wanted to remain sane. Because as a performer, being on the road all the time, and although I don't actually feel much pressure in performances anymore, there is always going to be some kind of stress, because you are going on stage and completely exposing yourself in front of an audience for about an hour. So it's very stressful. And being on the road, never sleeping, always traveling, don't have any friends. I remember at one point I forgot what city I was in. Actually, that happened quite a few times. I woke up in the hotel, called the reception. I'm sorry, where am I? And so, and the other side was I love sharing musical thoughts or just thinking, just talking to other people, especially the younger people. They have so many great ideas, and I know I'm supposed to be teaching them, but they're also teaching me as well. I'm sure you'd agree with this. It's a constant dialogue, exchange of ideas, and keeps me fresh. And, you know, I like the balance between the composing, the teaching, the publishing compositions, and the performing. This seems a more human life to me rather than just playing a bunch of concerts, and I start to lose track of what, life actually supposed to be.
Excellent. What attracted you to the U of O in particular?
I liked it here. Just the atmosphere here. I remember getting off the plane, I smelled the air. Smells like Vancouver.
Yes.
And then I saw the search committee chair, Steve Owen. Actually, I remember my interview was a nightmare because at the traveling to the interview was a nightmare because a snowstorm suddenly hit New York. I was in New York at the time, and all the planes were canceled. I forgot, I believe like 8 or 10 hour trip became an 18-hour trip. And I was supposed to arrive in the afternoon. I got here at 2 in the morning. Steve Owen, the head of the jazz department, still came and picked me up. And the first thing is I laughed and I'm like, I was so sure you were not going to make it. And with the first meeting, just immediately, the vibe of the U of O is just unpretentious. Everyone, mostly by first name basis, and we're completely friendly. And that's the perfect environment for open-minded idea exchange, which is exactly what a university should be.
Yeah, it's an exceptional school. School. So you're now the director of the Oregon Percussion Ensemble at the School of Music. Do you have any particular vision for the direction you're going to take that group in?
No, I mean, there's numerous different types of ensemble directors. I'm the type that's open to suggestions. The first meeting we had, I sat down. All right, so I have about 10 pieces in mind that I want you guys to play, but I want you guys to each give me 5 pieces that you want me to play, that you want to play, and then we'll just open up the dialogue. I mean, of course, there's some pieces that I don't actually like so much, but my students love it. So, and if I see it beneficial, I let them play it and then do my best to help them.
I had one question. I know that you often play solo,
Mm-hmm.
but you also sometimes play in duets. I saw,
Yes.
and you also play with groups as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's mostly solos and concertos with orchestra, but lately that's my another direction is to play with ensembles. And actually, in October, I went to Mexico with a couple other faculty at the U of O. It's a new music group called Beta Collide. Uh, I'm not sure if they're the official new music group of the university, but most of the people involved are faculty, and that was just such a blast.
Yeah, the new music here is very
Yeah.
strong, isn't it? Yes.
And Brian McWhorter and Molly Barth, they're just brilliant people, and again, with that exchange of ideas, because going to school at the Curtis Institute, they have a reputation of being quite old school. I mean, it's changed over the years, but it's still relatively traditional, and just getting thrown in the face with Brian McWhorter and Molly, they're complete.
Just say a little bit about them so that our
So
viewers know.
Brian is the trumpet professor, and Molly is the flute professor. Brian was a very busy freelancer in New York, playing a lot of off-the-wall stuff. And he actually went to school at the University of Oregon before he went to New York. And Molly was the flute player of, I'd say the most famous new music ensemble in the world, Eighth Blackbird. And put them together, and I get thrown into the mix. I'm like, I couldn't stop smiling the entire time during rehearsals. And people would expect, classical music rehearsals, completely serious. No, we're just joking the whole time.
That's wonderful. So, when are you next going to perform in Oregon?
I don't know, actually. The next few performances actually international, in Denmark and then in Hong Kong and Beijing. It's in the works.
You said that there's a connection to Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
There was a project that you're doing?
Yeah, the next CD project is
right,
possibly in collaboration with a Danish publishing house, and he's been organizing a lot of things for me in Denmark as well.
And so you do a lot of international collaboration as well?
Yes. I mean, the world is so small, and with Skype and YouTube, everyone knows everyone.
Do you find, I mean, you spoke very eloquently about the balance and the humanness of being a professor, but I was looking at your website, and it looks to me like you still do a real lot of traveling all over the world.
Yeah, actually less than I used to, but yes, quite a bit. Just, I sleep fairly well on planes. And I'm very grateful that my students are flexible to schedules, so we can make up lessons and sometimes do like a 2-hour lesson instead of once a week, 1 hour lesson. So.
Do you have any particular classroom experience that really has been important for you that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, yesterday.
Oh, great.
It was a percussion studio class, and it was our second time doing an improvisation class, because a lot of classical musicians get too stuck up with what's on paper and forget the true purpose of music, which is, it's expression of life. So the improv class really brought that out in all the personalities in our studio, and that was just an amazing time. At least for me it was. I think they had fun.
Well, I want to say that I've really enjoyed this conversation, and my final question is, could you say if there's anything unique about your technique that distinguishes you from other people that play the marimba? I mean, aside from the fact that you choose to play things that no one else has ever played before on marimba.
I mean, and other than the chair thing, I think an important thing that I try to embark on people and keep in mind myself, and I wouldn't say I'm the only one that does it, but I think of technique and very importantly as a vehicle for music and sound. I never focus on how fast or how accurate it is. I focus on what kind of sound it is getting and what purpose for in the musical context is the technique, rather than just mechanics of have to play this high, this fast.
Would you call yourself a kind of neo-romantic?
I've been called that. I don't know.
You're not a label guy. I know that.
I'm not, yeah.
The press I've read on you, everybody wants to label you.
That's what the press wants to do. They want to label people, but I prefer, because what does a word actually mean? Putting a label on something constricts the thinking, so I'd rather leave it all free and open. Words like Baroque, classical, romantic, neo-romantic, surrealism. Music is music, so just have fun with it.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us, Pius.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Pius Cheung, Assistant Professor of Percussion at the UO School of Music and Dance. He's an internationally renowned marimba artist and composer, and he's shortly going to be taking another world tour to Hong Kong, China, Denmark, and Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C., yeah.
Thanks very much for watching. Thanks again.